listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Welcome to the PEERx to Peer Pharmacy Talk podcast, where we bring you the latest insights, expert discussions, and continuing education to enhance your pharmacy practice. I'm your host, Dixie Laycock, pharmacist. We invite pharmacy experts to discuss how ethics and pharmacy hot topics mesh. I am the president and CEO of Pharmacy Ethics, Education, and Resources, PEERx. At PEERx, our mission is straightforward, yet profoundly important: to educate healthcare professionals on ethics to improve patient safety. So whether you're a seasoned pharmacist looking to refresh your ethical knowledge or a new practitioner eager to build a solid ethical foundation, PEERx to Peer Pharmacy Talk is here for you. We will hear from the leaders in pharmacy, provide case studies, engage in thought-provoking discussions, and leave you with actionable solutions to elevate your professional practice. Together, let's make a positive impact on our profession and the patients we serve. Hello, everyone. I'm Dixie Laycock, a pharmacist and entrepreneur. I host a podcast series on the Pharmacy Podcast Network and Convey Med app called PEERx to Peer Pharmacy Talk. This podcast series is possible through a grant with Waypoint Rx and their amazing team. Please visit their website at waypointus.com for more information about their solutions for independent pharmacies, including their Prosper Rx program. That's waypointus.com. Today, I'm thrilled to have Teresa Toll with me. Teresa is the owner and pharmacist of Bay Street Pharmacy in Florida and a past president of the American Pharmacists Association, which we affectionately call APHA. She also presents a continuing education podcast on the Convey Med app titled Pharmacist's Code of Ethics. Teresa, welcome. It's fantastic to be here with you today. So let's start from the beginning. What inspired you to pursue a career in pharmacy and eventually become a pharmacy owner?
Thanks, Dixie. I'm really happy to be here with you, and I appreciate the invitation to be part of the podcast. So I grew up in a small town in the Florida Panhandle, and I think that my initial reason for wanting to be a pharmacist is that my dad's youngest sister was a pharmacist. So she lived in Gainesville, so not super close to us, but we got to visit her occasionally. But I think that really what inspired me to want to not only be a pharmacist, but a pharmacy owner was just being in that small town. So 4,000 people, getting to see the couple of pharmacies that were in town and how they function. Of course, you go in there and you know everyone. And then my first pharmacy job was in one of those independent pharmacies in my hometown. So I was raised in my parents' business that was also just a local business where they knew a lot of their customers, and I worked there. It was a farm supply store. So I kind of got that customer service feel there, I think. But then my first job being in an independent pharmacy, I think really cemented that that's where I wanted to be for my career.
Well, that's great. So can you tell our listeners a little bit more about Bay Street Pharmacy? What makes it unique and special in your community?
Sure. So speaking of small towns, so I moved from a town of 4,000. Sebastian, Florida is 35,000, so not nearly as small as where I grew up, but still relatively rural. So I was very fortunate to come to this area when I graduated from pharmacy school and meet my husband, whose father happened to own this pharmacy. When I married into the family, I got the opportunity to come in as a partner, and then ultimately full owner. So this pharmacy was established in 1984. We were in our 40th year. And I think that's really one of the things that makes it very special. And because we've been here so long, and I've personally been here 26 27 years now. We have a lot of great relationships with the healthcare community in our area, and then, of course, with patients and, many generations of patients, which is really fortunate for us. So we feel very blessed to be in this community, and so thankful to be part of it.
Yeah, that's great. I know as a former independent pharmacy owner, that sense of community, our first location is in a, we're right on this Baltimore City, Baltimore County line, but the neighborhood is very close knit, and it's called Paradise. So we always joke that, we work in paradise, but it just really that sense of community. And I'm sure, what else besides dispensing services do you offer? Because I feel like that's so important in a small community to have that pharmacy hub for more pharmacist provided services.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me to touch on that. So we, compounding is one of our niches here that we've done for a really long time. And then also we do a lot of immunizations and did a lot during COVID, of course, even doing some community events and trying to get outside of our walls to make sure we were serving. We also have recently become accredited to teach diabetes education. So we're looking forward to getting into those DSMES classes. And then we do a lot of, so we're a CPESN pharmacy. So we are trying to do a lot with value-based care as well, and embrace all of those opportunities. And we've done MTM for a really long time as well.
Great. Well, I really need to get down to your part of Florida next time we're down there and visit, because I've heard so much about your pharmacy and just really would love to see it in person. So, and I also love hearing everybody's pharmacy story, because I feel like we all come from a different direction. Like I had a Girl Scout badge that kind of got me on this path, and we all come, some of us have pharmacy in our background, and some of us, like I think I've been in a pharmacy once before I went to apply for a job to be there during my pre-pharmacy to make sure this was something I really did want to do, and fell in love with community. And growing up in a small town on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, had that small town background and feel. So when Neil and I got married and decided, his dad was a pharmacist and an independent pharmacy owner, and that we just knew that was going to be in our future. And it really, for almost 25 years of pharmacy ownership, and we were able to keep it independent, which was even another husband wife bought our last 3 pharmacies. Nice. So that was really special too. We feel like we can still walk in there and act like, we own the place. Luckily, we're really good friends. We've been friends for a long time. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit. How did you get involved with APHA? Because, obviously as a past president, you were involved for many years. So tell our listeners a little bit about that journey and what got you to where you are now.
So I think it's the classic story of a mentor. And I was really fortunate. So I have always lived in Brevard County. So you mentioned coming over. So we're about an hour and a half from Orlando. So we're really close. If you are ever in Orlando, feel free to let me know if you want to come over and visit Dixie, or anybody listening.
Yeah, it's winter now. We call ourselves snow chicks. We're not quite birds. We only come for about 7 weeks, but we go to Orlando. So great.
All right, great. So we're super close. So I live in Brevard County, which is also known as the Space Coast, and that's where I've lived since I got out of pharmacy school. So one of the first things I did is join the Brevard County Pharmacy Association. And speaking of community, I did that for community. I didn't know a lot of people down here, and I wanted to plug in. And so that's, and I missed being active and involved in organizations when I was in pharmacy school. So I started looking for ways to plug in. And so I plugged into the Brevard County Pharmacy Association and met my core group of friends that are still my friends today. I'm so fortunate for that. But one of the people who was attending those meetings was a guy named Red Camp. Red was a pharmacy owner in Titusville, which is on the north end of our county. But Red was also the speaker of the APHA House. So he saw some kind of spark in in me and decided that I was going to be a future leader, and he wanted to plug me in right away. So I've been out of pharmacy school about 4 years, and he put me on a policy committee. And that just really started my trajectory in almost everything I've done in pharmacy. I found out how much I love policy. And it got me involved, at the national level really early. A few years later, I actually ran for a section for the academy. They were named different at that time, but it was the community and ambulatory section, and I won, which was amazing to me. So pretty young pharmacist. I've been out of school 7 years and was incoming chair of the community and ambulatory section of APHA. So that's how it got started. And then, of course, I had my hands in a lot of other things, was active in FPA too, but kind of doing a lot of the things, and actually took a step or two back when I had my kids in 96 and 98 and stayed a little less active, but then plugged back in as they started getting older.
Yeah, that's great. I find, there's always that one person that, they may not even realize what they're starting or what they're doing. I had pharmacists down here when I worked in Salisbury, and she's, Sharon Almond, she's really just become, the start of my story. And it happened that there was a scholarship through the Maryland Pharmacists Association, and she was a member. So we sat there. I still remember filling out the application because you had to type it, and there was, had to have the original, like there was no making any mistake. So we sent it in, and I got the scholarship, and that really got me involved in Maryland Pharmacists Association, which led to, as a past president, but got me involved in other pharmacy organizations, and even, Sharon, even though she wasn't a member, but she was the one who encouraged me to find a pharmacy fraternity in school. So I became a member of Lambda Kappa Sigma, and ended up being past president of that organization. So you never know what, when you recognize that future leader in somebody, what your actions can really lead to. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And so we've collaborated on a podcast that offers 30 minutes of ACPE accredited continuing education. We'll be discussing the Pharmacist Code of Ethics. And as the president and CEO of Pharmacy Ethics, Education, and Resources, or affectionately known as PEERx, I emphasize the APHA Pharmacist Code of Ethics in every continuing education program and presentation that I give, because I think it's so important for pharmacists to be reminded of this, that it does exist, it's out there, and any student pharmacists to also, I know they get exposed to it, but know where to find it and know what's involved in it. So let's talk a little bit about the podcast. It's titled Pharmacist Code of Ethics, and it's available on the Convey Med app. I really appreciate you partnering with me on this important project, because APHA is the voice of pharmacy, and the Pharmacist Code of Ethics is crucial. So without giving too much away, can you give our listeners a little teaser about what they'll learn from the podcast?
Sure. So the American Pharmacists Association was founded in 1852, so a long time ago. We're almost at our 175th anniversary. So I think that it's important to kind of just talk about the history of the organization, of pharmacy in the United States, and why the founders decided that we needed a code of ethics. So we'll touch on that. We'll touch on the changes, which are fascinating, and thank you, Dixie, for making me learn more about the history of it, because I've learned a lot along the way. But, the changes along the way, and some of them will be surprising to you, I think. Some of the things that pharmacists were not allowed to do, or the things that were focused on in the early days, and how it's changed. So I think that's probably enough of a teaser, but it hasn't changed that often. I guess I could say that, it's something that once they've written it, it's stayed in place most of the time, 30 years at a time or so, but then they would revisit it. So anyway, I look forward to discussing it further and with everyone, and letting them hear some of the history and why it's important.
Yeah, I find sometimes I learn just as much as what I'm presenting. I always learn something new when I do the research for a project. And,
Yeah.
it is, I just find the APHA history fascinating, and thinking about what was started so long ago, and did the founders of the organization have any idea what
Mhm.
they were building? So
I'm
I'm really
of course
excited.
not. I'm sure they didn't.
Yeah, I think our listeners will really enjoy this continuing education. It's informative, it's fun, and we will dive into some ethics with it, because that's what it's all about. So the Convey Med app is available as a free download on your app store of choice. The Pharmacy Podcast Network will also have a link. And this ACPE accredited 30-minute continuing education is free and provides 0.5 CEUs. You can find a link to Teresa's podcast, CE Pharmacist Code of Ethics, on the PEER website at PEERx.org. That's PEERx.org. 2 R's. I had to make it complicated. So I don't think most pharmacists realize how much work APHA does in forming, you mentioned policy, but forming policies and updating them as the profession evolves. Even ethics, which seems timeless, can benefit from updates every decade. The document is pretty timeless and can stand the test of time, but there are sometimes updates that need to be made. So where can pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and student pharmacists go to learn more about APHA and how to get involved, like you mentioned?
Yeah, so APHA's website is pharmacist.com, just simply PHARMACIST.com. And you can just type in on a search Code of Ethics and it'll pull it up. Also, on the House of Delegates page, there is a reference to the Code of Ethics. And then one of the things we will touch on in the podcast is the Pharmacist Conscience Clause. So you can type in the word conscience there and find the Pharmacist Conscience Clause as well. So that, and anything related to membership, if you're not a member of APHA, of course, I would be remiss as past president of not asking you to join. And just reiterate with what Dixie said, APHA does so much from a policy and regulatory standpoint of really just fighting for a profession. It's nonstop work on behalf of our association and leaders. So we encourage you to join. Sometimes I think you don't realize, like she stated, all the work that's being done on our behalf, but our national organizations are fiercely fighting for us, and APHA is among them. So we hope you'll consider being a member.
Yeah, and I'm proud to say I've been a member every year since since I've been in pharmacy school. Was involved a little bit in the ASP chapter, but I always made sure I was a member and have continued that. And I have to say, I really enjoy, I try to go to the annual meeting every year. It doesn't always work, but when I do, I enjoy being part of the House of Delegates process, because I feel like I learned so much there. But I also, when you watch the room and just how passionate people are about pharmacy and how that goes into the APHA policies, and you get a different, you've got all those different organizations in the room, all convened together and working together and compromising and debating. And it really, I find it a lot of fun. So if you like policy and, want to get involved, I find that the House of Delegates process, either serving on a committee, I know every year they do a call, I think that's closed to this point, but in the future, there's always a call to membership to be involved in the process leading up to the House of Delegates. And then, there are a lot of different organizations that you can be a delegate for the House. So if that's something you're interested in, I think that's a great place to start. There's also the special interest groups. That's another place for people to get involved. So, but the membership's the first part.
Yeah, and let's just touch briefly on that. APHA actually just announced a bylaws change that passed with over 90% of vote by our members. So we are doing more and more to make sure there is a place for someone to feel plugged in. So if you've looked at APHA in the past and you thought you didn't fit, we hope you'll give it another look. There will be some changes as we implement this bylaws change, but we're actually going to change the structure of our board of directors. We're going to add a technician member, make sure that there's a seat for a new practitioner member. So we're trying to modernize, if you will, our membership structure to ensure through the groups you just mentioned, Dixie, but more to ensure that that pharmacists and student pharmacists feel like they have a home at APHA. So hopefully, like I said, if you've looked before, look again, at least, by next spring with all these changes getting implemented. But I'm really excited about the direction APHA is taking and realizing that we need to do more to make sure our members do feel like they really can find their home at APHA.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, the board of directors gets a big round of applause for the work they've been doing to move the organization forward. And I think our new head, Michael Hogue, has been doing a great job. I really do enjoy getting his emails and reading them. And those are ones I try to make sure I take time to read because he always makes a good point. So I think everybody chose well when bringing Michael in. So let's review a little bit. For information about our grant sponsor, WaypointRx, and their solutions for independent pharmacy, go to waypointus.com. For information about PEER, you go to PEERx.org. And our continuing education podcast on medication safety and pharmacy ethics and APHA are available on the Pharmacy Podcast Network and the ConveyMed app. So thank you again so much for your time today, Teresa. I appreciate it. And Teresa Toll, past president of APHA, independent pharmacist owner of Bay Street Pharmacy in Florida, not far from Orlando. When you go to visit Mickey, you can go to visit Teresa too. So, and presenter of the Pharmacist Code of Ethics Podcast CE, now available on the ConveyMed app and the Pharmacy Podcast Network. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us.
Additional programming is available on the PEERx website, which is PEERx.org. Again, PEERx.org.